Imagine you could travel back 2,500 years. You walk through ancient Greece. You see massive
Observe
temples,
the world
busy
around you.
marketplaces,
Wisely
warriors
begins
carrying
in
shields,
wonder.
philosophers
This
arguing in the
is the
streets,
path to
and
truth.
ordinary people
Keep
going about
walking
their
through
daily
it.
lives. Everything looks strange and unfamiliar. And then, suddenly, you notice something that looks very familiar. Two people lean toward each other and kiss. Wait, did ancient Greeks actually kiss? The answer is yes. And the way kissing was used in ancient Greece is much more interesting than you might think. Ancient Greece was completely different from our world. There were no phones, no cars, no social media, and definitely no dating apps. If someone wanted to meet another person, they actually had to meet them in real life. But one thing hasn't changed much. Humans still wanted love. They formed relationships, became attracted to other people, felt jealous, missed the people they cared about, and showed affection, including kissing. In fact, the basic emotions behind relationships may be far older than any civilization we know. We know this because ancient Greek writers actually wrote about kisses. Greek literature contains references to kissing, including romantic and affectionate kisses. Ancient Greek art also gives us clues about relationships, intimacy, and physical affection. So this wasn't some modern invention that appeared recently. People were already kissing thousands of years ago. The strange thing is that when we look at ancient history, we usually focus on wars, kings, temples, and famous philosophers. We rarely think about the tiny, everyday moments that made up people's lives. But kissing was one of those moments. But here's the interesting part. A kiss didn't always mean, "I love you." Depending on the situation, kissing could show affection, friendship, respect, or social connection. So if you somehow traveled back to ancient Greece and saw two people kiss, you couldn't immediately assume they were a couple. You would have to understand who those people were, what their relationship was, and what was happening around them. Context mattered a lot. Just like today, the same physical gesture could communicate very different things depending on the situation. But romantic kissing? Yes. Ancient Greek poetry and literature describe desire, attraction, and intimate affection. The poet Sappho, for example, wrote intensely about love and desire. Her surviving poetry shows just how powerful romantic feelings could be in the ancient world. Her words are separated from us by thousands of years, yet the emotions behind them can still feel surprisingly familiar. That's important because it reminds us that people thousands of years ago weren't emotionally different from us. They could become obsessed with someone. They could feel nervous around someone they liked. They could miss someone when they were gone. They could want to be physically close to someone. Those feelings didn't suddenly appear in the modern world. Their clothes were different. Their buildings were different. Their food was different. Their language was different. Their technology was almost nothing like ours. But attraction, jealousy, love, curiosity, wanting to be close to someone, those feelings were already there. And that may be one of the most fascinating things about studying ancient history. The world changes incredibly fast, but human emotions can remain surprisingly familiar. Ancient Greek culture also had different social situations where physical affection could happen. A kiss could be connected to greeting someone. It could show affection. It could communicate familiarity or respect. And in romantic situations, it could mean something much more intimate. So the meaning of a kiss depended on who was involved and why they were doing it. In other words, there wasn't one single ancient Greek definition of a kiss. The gesture had a social meaning, and that meaning changed with the circumstances. But now comes the really interesting question. If ancient Greeks kissed, did cavemen kiss too? Think about that for a second. Humans had existed for hundreds of thousands of years before the ancient Greek civilization appeared. So if kissing was already part of human behavior in Greece, could it have existed much earlier? Maybe, but this is where the evidence becomes much harder to find. Well, that's much harder to prove. We don't have prehistoric videos. We don't have love letters from cavemen. And we definitely don't have a cave painting labeled, "Our First Kiss." We don't even know exactly how prehistoric people expressed affection in every situation. Archaeology can tell us many things about how they lived, what they ate, where they traveled, and what tools they used. But emotions and private relationships are much harder to leave behind in the archaeological record. Scientists can study prehistoric human behavior through archaeology, biology, and anthropology. Humans are naturally social animals, and physical affection is found across many human cultures. There are also biological reasons to think that close physical contact could have played a role in human bonding, so it's possible that kissing existed long before written history. It may even have been extremely old. But possible doesn't mean proven, and that's the important difference. We shouldn't turn an interesting possibility into a fact just because it sounds believable. With ancient Greece, we're on much safer ground because these people left behind something prehistoric humans didn't have in the same way: extensive written records, poetry, artwork, literature, and other surviving evidence. Together, these give us clues about how people experienced love and affection. We can actually read ancient words describing desire and examine artwork showing human relationships. It doesn't give us a perfect picture of everyday life, but it gives us far more evidence than we have for prehistoric humans. And maybe that's the strangest part of the whole story. When we imagine ancient people, we often imagine them as completely different from us. We see statues, ruins, old weapons, and ancient texts, and it can feel like we're looking at another species. But look closer. They laughed. They argued. They fell in love. They missed people. They wanted affection. They worried about relationships. They wrote poems about desire. And yes, they kissed. The details of their lives were different, but the emotions behind many of those details were incredibly human. So did ancient Greeks kiss? Absolutely. Not every kiss meant romance, but kissing was clearly part of the social and emotional world of ancient Greece. Romantic kissing existed, affectionate kissing existed, and kissing could also have social meanings. So the next time you imagine ancient Greece, don't just picture marble statues and warriors. Picture ordinary people too. People meeting each other, talking, laughing, falling in love, and sometimes leaning closer for a kiss. And when you think about it, that's kind of amazing. Thousands of years have passed. Civilizations disappeared. Languages changed. Borders changed. Entire cities were built and abandoned. Technology changed completely. Yet some human feelings stayed remarkably familiar. The same basic desire to connect with another person can be found again and again throughout human history. Because maybe the ancient Greeks weren't as different from us as we imagine. They weren't emotionless people trapped in an ancient world. They were humans with fears, desires, friendships, relationships, and dreams. They were just humans, living in a very different world. And perhaps that's what makes ancient history so fascinating. The further back we look, the more we realize that even thousands of years ago, people were still trying to do the same basic thing we are doing today. Understand each other, find someone they care about, and feel close to another human being.